Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Colin Gibbons. I'm Director of Product Management at Splunk. I've been working very closely with AWS for the last few years on building out this integration that we're going to be talking about today. And with me, I have Javier.
Hey, folks. Last minute change. I'm actually Javier Teitelbaum. I'm working at AWS as a Builder Solutions Architect and Incident Responder. I'm helping folks innovate in the cloud while also helping customers on the customer side of the shared responsibility model during active events.
Great. So I don't know if you heard, but yesterday on the keynote, there was some announcements that were made about the integration that Splunk did with Security Lake. We made the announcement at both here, and we also made the announcement at Splunk Conf. So I'm the only person that came here from Splunk to support the Inforce, to support this announcement that we did. When you look at today, there are different integrations that we have as it relates to AWS. So available on Splunk Base, today we have a technical add-on that if you're a Splunk customer, you might be using our TA to basically pull data from AWS, from the different AWS event sources down into Splunk. Last year, we also made an announcement that we had updated the AWS TA to support Security Lake. And so that means if you're a Security Lake customer, you could configure the TA to basically subscribe, subscribers to listen for SQS, to basically then pull data from Security Lake based on those whatever your subscribers are set for, whether it's VPC, CloudTrail, or whatever. Now, so that was great, but what a lot of our customers were asking for was basically like, hey, we don't want to pull all the data into Splunk. When we start talking about different types of logs, like VPC flow logs, WAF logs, things that are like very high volume, low fidelity, as a security analyst, you want to be able to have access to this data when it comes to an investigation. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at a breach, I'm looking at an incident, I see some unusual traffic coming from my EC2 instance, I want to be able to go analyze this traffic. Well, if I'm in Splunk, and I'm working within Splunk, I want to be able to stay in Splunk and do everything in Splunk. But if I don't have my VPC flow logs there, and I don't have my networking data there, or whatever data, then I'll have to go either pivot to Athena, or I have to go to OpenSearch, or I have to go someplace else, which then basically takes me eyes off glass if I'm sitting here doing this investigation. So basically, we announced two new integrations. So we announced it under this umbrella of what we call federated analytics. So under federated analytics, there's two new integrations that we're doing with Security Lake. The first one is what we call federated search for Security Lake. So last year, we announced federated search for S3, which basically allows you to search an S3 bucket. Federated search for Security Lake works in the same manner. The other one that we announced is what we call Data Lake Index, which basically allows you to pull back data that is coming into Security Lake into a rolling window. Think of it as a temporary index. So you're not pulling back the data and committing the data into Splunk for storage. You're pulling the data back into Splunk into a summary index where you're able to run searches against the data and or detections. When you think about regular Splunk data, as you're sending data into Splunk, the data comes into a regular index and is basically stored for retention. So I'm pulling in data, I'm storing the data, I'm committing the data. Well, we wanted to basically give customers the ability to access the data in Security Lake, but let the data stay in Security Lake, not basically have to pull it back and store it in Splunk, but give you the ability to do things like querying the data, run detections against the data. Over the course of the past year, I've probably spoken about 40, 50 different customers on this topic. And, typical use cases that I will hear from customers is like, well, I want to have access to my VPC flow logs, like I mentioned, but I just kind of want to look at them when I need to, but I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't want to store it in Splunk because of the cost. It's high volume, low fidelity data. So when we start talking about use cases like around threat hunting, hey, I want to go search for this indicator, I want to go search for this finding in data that's stored in Security Lake. Now through federated search, right from the Splunk UI, I can go in there, I can run a query, whatever. Go search for 10.0.0.1, and it will go search Security Lake for that IP address, and then it will pull back the information. But then it's not committing it to disk. It's just basically telling me that, hey, I found this indicator and this data in Security Lake. Now, if I want to take it and elevate it into an incident or add it to a notable in enterprise security, then I would have the ability to do that. Now, what about the use case of where I'm an enterprise security customer and I have detections that I want to run periodically against that data? Some of our enterprise security customers, run, they might have queries that they run hourly. Some of them have, queries that they run daily, but they want to be able to, schedule and run these queries on a more periodic basis than just kind of ad hoc. So for that particular use case, when we're talking more about the threat detection use case instead of the threat hunting use case, that is the capability that you get with this basically, like I was talking about, the data index. So with there, it works kind of similar to the TA, which Javier will get into, where you go and you set up a subscriber, and then when you go in there and you set up the subscriber, you say, hey, maybe I'm interested in pulling 30 days worth of CloudTrail, VPC, CloudWatch data into this rolling window. And so as the data is coming into Security Lake, then basically we're listening, and then we fetch the data into this rolling window, and it looks just like any other normal index within Splunk. So any other index that you've got in Splunk, it's just very similar to that index. So if I go let's say for example, if I'm pulling data from VPC, so it will create an index for my VPC flow logs, and then I can go run a query, or I could create a detection to say go run this detection against index equal VPC, for example. And then I could just run and it just looks like any other index. So then I could be scheduling my queries, running queries, whatever, against that data that's in that particular index. And the cool thing is with it is that, for example, I can set up different retentions for these different indexes. So maybe, for example, like VPC flow logs, let's say, or let's use CloudTrail, because CloudTrail comes up probably more than often. Usually when I talk to most customers about CloudTrail, they're usually running detections against CloudTrail data like every 7 days. Like usually they tell me like, hey, I've got some customers that are doing it every 24 hours. They're running enterprise security detections against it, looking for IAM policy violations, things like that. So I could say, hey, I want to have this rolling window of 7 days worth of CloudTrail data that then ages out after 7 days or 24 hours, whatever I want to set up that retention for, that then I've got my queries that are running against that index. But maybe for something like my VPC flow logs, I don't really care. I just want to, look at them every 24 hours to see if there's anything, that is of interest in there. And the other thing with the Security Lake use case, that when you think about other findings, so Security Hub, Guard Duty, those products will send their findings into Security Lake. So again, that's just another subscriber that you can set up to basically pull the findings from those products as well. Now, depending on how familiar you are in general with Security Lake also supports third-party data sources. So they have X amount of vendors that support sending their third. So, for example, CrowdStrike Falcon can send the Falcon data into Security Lake. Palo Alto supports Security Lake. So again, maybe there's data that you were not sending into Splunk because again, high volume, low fidelity that you can now start sending into Security Lake. But now the key advantage to the value is now you get access to data in Splunk that you maybe didn't have access to before because you were not sending that data into Splunk.
Yep. So, like what I spoke about yesterday, what we're looking to do is enable a write once, read many functionality, right? It works best when we can have one central location where we have all of our logging. And so to do this, we're really looking to leverage subscribers and providers. And in this case, a subscriber, let's think of it as Splunk or a service that is looking to read that data or access that data. And a provider, in our case, and we'll go through in a demo in a moment, the providers in our case will be where that data is that we're looking at, right? The glue data catalogs or the glue data tables. And so we have a recorded demo here where we're going to go through the process of setting up the subscribers and the providers. So within the Splunk console, first, before we can do anything, we need to make sure that we have a token provisioned and ready. So we'll go ahead and enable token authentication. From there, in federated search, we look to add a federated provider. We have the choice of Splunk, S3, and Security Lake. Basic, we need to give a name for our provider. We'll go with Buttercup Games. And this is where the subscribers piece comes into play. We need to have a subscriber for data ingest and a subscriber for search access. And so this is done on the AWS side. So we go into Security Lake and we create a subscriber for each. We're going to start off with the subscriber for data access. We provide the account ID from Splunk along with the external ID also from Splunk. And key thing to note here, Splunk and this account are all in the Oregon region. This is a key thing in order to enable this functionality. We can go ahead and identify which log and event sources we want. So we'll go ahead and select CloudTrail management events and Security Hub events. And right now we're using the SQS S3 methodology for data access. Takes a moment. That is our first subscriber for data access. And so when we come back into the console, we're going to get more data so we can create our search querying access. And that will be done through lake formation. Same thing, account ID and external ID, both from Splunk. We can specify our log and event sources. And we'll do the same. Management CloudTrail events and Security Hub events, or findings rather. And we'll follow with lake formation. And so what lake formation, or the difference here is lake formation is going to create the shared resources that we're going to use as the providers. With the original subscriber, this will generate a role that will allow Splunk provisioned access or provisioned permissions to pull the data from S3, to pull messages from SQS, etc. That is that subscription endpoint. The resource share, name, and ARN are going to come from the lake formation side. So we'll go into lake formation subscriber. We'll get the resource share name and its associated resource number or name. The next step is with the providers, and that's where we'll get the glue information required. Here we'll have to select that we are working in the same region. We'll go into Resource Access Manager. We will select the associated resource share. Find the data catalog name, which in this case, the database name. And then next we can provide a comma-separated value list of table names, which we have in the same page. There it's pasted. On to the next step. And so here, when we're setting up the indexes, we're able to add or remove rows, and we're able to update some of these event classes and retention periods, as Colin was mentioning earlier. At the next step, we're able to make some edits and some changes with our federated index names. And a summary page. Once completed, we've set up our subscribers and providers, which enables the write once, read many functionality for federated analytics.
Yes. So then once that is set up, then when it comes to doing a search, then you can come in here based on the index names that we had kind of set up here. Then whenever you come under search, you'll see your providers, you'll see your indexes, and then you'll see your data lake indexes. So, as he pointed out, when you would just walk through that, very simple to set up. And the key thing is, like, you can get very granular, on the types of logs and what event classes, categories, and everything else that you want to pull into the index, or what data you want to go through and you want to search on. So in this particular case, we're going to come here and we're going to take this, this specific event down here, or alert that we saw down here, and we're going to come over here. We're going to take this particular source IP, and then if you notice, one of the things that will appear when you look at, for example, index equals main, we'll come over here, we'll switch over. We're going to go to federated index. We're going to go to this VPC flow log index, and then over here you can see that now we're going to go launch a search into that VPC flow log index. And then we're going here and searching for that specific IP address, limiting it to 10. Now basically we get our results back. So this is basically us pointing at that VPC flow log index, me going searching for that IP, it going out there, initiating that query, pulling back the results into Splunk. But again, I don't have to persist the data in Splunk. I'm not having to pull that. That data is not. It just basically comes back into the Splunk UI. And then if I want to persist it, I can. Or if I wanted to add it to an incident within an enterprise security, I could.